Hi, Michel Bluteau here from BeyondTrust, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to look at a demonstration for some integration between AWS, Amazon Web Services, and BeyondTrust. We're going to focus on password safe in this demonstration. And first, what I want to show you is how we can take advantage of password safe to rotate the credentials for AWS, for an account in AWS that we can use in applications to access the AWS Web Services API, the REST API. So we're going to look at how we can manage those credentials, rotate those credentials. And when we're talking about the credentials associated with a service account that we use in AWS to access the API, we're really talking about what they call an access key. So this is the IAM interface here. And if I look at my list of users, so the first step is really to have access or create a user. I created a user called BTU API here. And if I look at the properties for this user has been granted some permissions. So this user can be used to query the REST API interface for Amazon, for AWS. So you can grant, different types of permissions here. And the security credential tab will show you the access key. So first you'll need to create an initial access key. And this access key is also associated with a secret that you can take a look at when you create the initial access key, or you can also use API calls to take a look at it once it is in the BeyondTrust password safe. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So the first step, you create the user, um, create the initial access key, grant the permission. So this user is functional. It can be used by applications or scripts that will interface with the AWS API. Then you may be looking for more information about how to get started. So the first step before we can use password safe to manage your credential is to install what is called the command line interface, the CLI. So it's a client that you can download and install. So there is a utility here, but you can also download what they call the bundle installers. I can provide more detailed information in a separate document. If you need to take a look at it, just reach out to me at mbluto@beyondtrust.com, and I'm willing to share more detailed information, including a quick document that includes all those steps and all the URLs that you see in this video, plus some script examples. And you can download this for a Linux or Windows server, and you will be using that to interface with the AWS API to rotate the credentials or the access key, ID, and secret. I use the Linux version. I'm running this on a Linux server in my lab environment. Then you'll need to go to BeyondTrust. So I will log into the Beyond Insight console. So I'll log in as the administrator. And we will need to create a few things here to configure a few things. So we can also use the REST API in BeyondTrust for password safe to be able to update the password in the safe and the manage account that we're managing in password safe. So we're going to go to the configure tab, and now we're going to configure an API registration. Sometimes this can be found under authentication depending on the version of Beyond Insight you're looking at. But basically we're creating a new API registration configuration item. I decided to call it integration. You can also provide some IP filters here to determine which servers will be able to leverage this integration here. So I'm using a Linux server on the same subnet, so I'm just allowing the full subnet here. And the API key can also be copied. If you click on the lock here, you can see the API key. So we're going to need that in our scripts in order to be able to update the password and password safe for the AWS account. And the password is actually the access key and ID and secret. Then we're going to need to make sure we have an account available that can query the password save API. So I have one here that I created for ServiceNow, so I'm just going to reuse it. But basically, the group, you can create a local group. You could also use an LDAP or Active Directory group and user, but here I'm using local group and user. And you need to make sure that you're granting permissions. So you're going to need, at a minimum, one permission for your managed accounts. So if I look at the permission here for my default organization, Credential Manager is the main permission. It's mandatory. You need that in order to be able to update a password and password safe for a managed account. I decided to use Requester as the password safe role, and I'm pointing to my default access policy here, which should be fine. And one thing also you need to do for the group, you need to check the box for Enable API and select one or multiple integration here to link everything together with the key. And I have my account here that I'm going to be reusing. So the account name is Snow API here, but you could create any other account and you can set the password to pretty much any value you want. We're not really going to be using the password in our configuration. Once you have that, then we're going to go under assets. And of course, you would probably want to be able to discover your AWS environment and the IAM side of things in AWS. But for this demonstration, what I did is I just created a quick asset manually. So you can just click on the plus sign here and create an asset. I created one called AWS Amazon. And if I take a look at it, you know, I decided to just configure the minimum here, put a fictitious IP address. We're not going to try to discover this asset for now. And then you can click on the arrow here on the right and add the asset to password safe. Here, it's been already added, so I don't need to add it again, but I'm going to cd edit password safe instead of add to password safe option. And this is the account I created here based on the Windows platform. I linked it to a functional account, default password rule, and I think you can probably uncheck password management. We're not connected to the AWS asset for now. And in terms of my local account, so just going to cancel these. So once the configuration is saved, you can go to the local account tabs. You can create the new account. It's already created on my demo environment. And if I look at the properties for this account, nothing very special, but I do enable it for API access. This is required depending on the version of password safe that you are using. So now I have my managed account in my AWS asset that I created manually in Beyond Insights. So everything should be in place now for me to try to talk to the API. And when I'm talking about the API, I'm talking about the API in both AWS and Beyond Insight or the API for password safe. So let's start with the API for password safe. So I'm just going to show you a little script here that I created. It's called get manage account. So this is really the first step that I'm using here. I'm using curl, which is a utility that's available out of the box on all Unix or Linux distributions, recent ones. And I'm using 3 calls here, one to get a session or to authenticate against the Password Safe API. And I'm using the key here, so you need to copy your key here. Of course, you'll need also to use the IP address for your password safe server, the one that is exposing the Web Services API, and also the name of the account here that I created in Beyond Insight with access to the API. So if I call this little script here, and I copied all my script under /root/AWS, so by default that's the working subdirectory. So if I just use putty here and I call this script, so it should be working. So if it's working, it's going to show you an HTTP 200 OK message, and the output file is going to be a JSON document. By default, it's going to be manage account.json, and you'll be able to see all the accounts that are exposed to the API. And the one that we're interested in is, of course, the AWS. So if I do a search, it shows up here in the list. I can see the account ID, which is 18, and you need to note that. And system ID is 15. So we will need that in one of the scripts as well. So 15 and 18, those are the 2 values we need to remember. The second script is actually using those 2 values to be able to retrieve the password for this account. So we can just execute that second script now. And again, it's orchestrating three different calls. And now if I do a cat on my password.txt, I should see a combination of the access key ID and the secret. I use semicolon as a separator. It's completely um, arbitrary, but that means, later on, if you want to use this in another script, this value, or if you want to be able to use it in an application, you'll have to use some substring after a substring before around this separator here to extract those 2 values and build the authentication header that you will need to be able to authenticate and interface with the REST API for AWS. Now the main script. So the main script is the script that's actually doing the job. So I call it rotate key here. And this script here does a few things. So first, it will interface with the AWS instance through the CLI, and you can check your configuration here for AWS. Basically, once you install the CLI, you can run configure, and you need to specify an access key. And secret key, the region, and the output format. So this is basically a configuration that would work. You can change the region to match your region, but this script will use AWS CLI to rotate the password or the credentials, access key ID, and secret in AWS, and then eventually this script will also update password safe with some curl calls here, and we can run the script and you'll see it in action. So if I go into my interface here, I'm just going to clear my screen, and I'm going to launch the script. So you can see the script going through the different steps here, and what the script will do, it will check if there is an existing access key. So that's why you need to create an initial one in AWS for your account. Then it will create a new one. It will get rid of the old one. And if everything is successful, it's going to show you a successful message, and then it's going to move to the last step, which is to update the managed account in password safe by storing the concatenation of access key ID and secret into the password for the managed account. So this should take a few more seconds. Now it's calling password safe with curl, and things should be complete now. So if I run the get password again and take a look at the password, now I should see the new combination of access key ID and access key secret. And this is an example using curl of programmatically I can, get those values from the password safe and then use them to, run any command against the REST API for AWS. If I take a look at my AWS interface, now if I just refresh my browser on the security tab for the user, I should be able to see a key that matches the one that we just retrieved from the password safe. So this is a first example here on how you can consume the credentials from password safe after running this script. In this script, you probably want to use cron to schedule it, or you could use a scheduler or any type of orchestrator. So you could, for example, decide you want to execute this script every day at midnight to rotate the access key ID and secret in AWS, and also to update the managed account in password safe. So if a script or an application needs to fetch, these credentials, they're going to be up to date when it fetches them from password safe. I'm going to show you quickly a few more examples. So this is the example of a script, but we can provide examples also that are based on Python, VB-script, PowerShell. It's also possible to look at examples that are specific to applications, so A2A or application to application example. For example, if you have a .NET application, so I have a server here or a workstation with Visual Studio.NET. So I'm just gonna log in here, and I'm gonna show you a quick application. It's like the basically Hello World application I created for C# .NET, and it's less complicated than some of the examples that we provide in the Password Safe API kit. We provide a comprehensive list of examples for various applications and scripts. C# or .NET is one example that is covered. So, but here this is a simplified one. It ignores the certificate for security. It's just to be able to show how we can use a quick C# application to interface with the safe. So that's not something that's production grade, but it's kind of handy to be able to retrieve the information. It's a console app, and it is fully documented in a separate document that I can provide. And I'm just gonna execute this app. You can see system ID and account ID here. It's doing something very similar to the curl script that we looked at a few minutes ago. So first, it's going to try to fetch all the different accounts that are available, and so you can see account ID, platform ID, so you can basically identify, which account you want to include in the last call, which is a get password. And you can see here we are getting the credentials, the access key ID and secret here in a similar fashion that we saw with the example based on curl. One last example I'm going to show to you, another A2A example, is ServiceNow. So again, I have another application. I'm just going to refresh it so you can show it in action. You can see it in action. But this is another application that's fully documented on its own separately, and it's based on a catalog item in ServiceNow. So if I look at the configuration, everything is based on a catalog item. I have some script includes for the server side scripts, and I have some catalog client scripts for the client side. So the catalog client scripts are using Glide Ajax to call the server side script to resolve those values that I'm after, for example, to retrieve the password here, or in our example, to retrieve the concatenation of access key ID and secret. If I take a look at the application in action, the first thing it does when I access this application, it shows me some debug information. So that's the list again of all the accounts and account IDs and system IDs that is used behind the scene. You don't really need to see that because in the drop-down menu here, we're going to show you a user-friendly value so you can see your BTU API, and we're going to resolve behind the scene all those account IDs and system IDs for you. So if I select BTU API, it it is going to retrieve again the same combination of access key, ID, and secret. So that's another example here of A2A on top of the .NET and on top also of the script example I showed you with curl. And hopefully that is some interesting information here that will get you started versus the workflow that needs to be put in place and the kind of script that is required to be able to obtain support when it comes to being able to manage your credentials in AWS using BeyondTrust PowerBroker Password Safe. So thank you very much for your time and for watching this video. And until next time, I wish you a very good day.